Brent and Ryan in the morning. Good morning. I'm Brent.
And I'm Ryan.
And this is Brent and Ryan in the morning. And welcome. We're now into week 10. Man, we are moving right along through the New Testament. This is great. And today and yesterday, we actually have jumped into two of Peter's letters, and a letter written by one of Jesus' brothers, known as Jude. Yeah. And as I read through this, Ryan, I thought you had to love these because they had so many Old Testament references.
And when I came in after reading it, I'm like, I love this.
That's right. And I had in my notes, Ryan's going to love this.
Peter mentions the flood 3 times. In Jude, we read about Sodom and Gomorrah and about Enoch. Peter's got pretty much every spot when you're reading Peter where the text jumps in. He's quoting Old Testament text there, and so that's how they show us what he's doing there. And one spot that jumped out to me is he uses the exact same, the stone the builders rejected.
Oh yeah, we just read that.
Jesus just quoted a few days back last week in the book of Mark.
And that's the genius of reading it the way we're reading it now, is because it's easier for us to make those ties together. To see, oh yeah, Mark mentioned that, who was getting his information from Peter, and here's Peter saying it now in a letter. So it's all tying together. So this was evidently an important teaching that Peter really latched onto.
People stumble over Jesus. They want to do religion their own way. And Peter says, well, actually, there's a whole lot of judgment that we're going to find ourselves in.
Absolutely. Oh, judgment, though. That leads us to a very challenging subject, because that's not something we like to talk about today. We sometimes want to make the gospel of Jesus easy, palatable. Is that a great word to use for it right there? Easy to swallow. And really, though, Peter's letters and Jude really kind of talk about that. It's not that way, though. There is a scary aspect to this.
And I think that they're able to do that because they're writing to people who are going through so much difficulty in the life right now. And they're saying, continue, push through that persecution because you want to avoid what may be on the other side of this life.
True. And sometimes I think, though, that we forget that judgment is not because God is angry at us. It's that God is angry at what sin has done to us. And a God that is love must also be a God that has wrath in some regards, because he wants to protect his creation. He wants to separate that sin from us and bring us to wholeness and fullness and restoration at some point, which is also leading us into something else that we find a lot of in Peter and Jude, is just simply this idea that our grace that we have, our salvation, is not a license for us to sin, and we should be reminded that the faith that we have was not a faith that I prayed a prayer one time ages ago and that was it, but it's a faith that continues to grow and develop each and every day.
Right. Jude is the one that really speaks to that in the beginning of his letter, where he says, saying that God's marvelous grace allows us to live immoral lives. Some people... It's easy to say with your mouth, I believe in Jesus, but your actions sometimes deceive what you think you're saying you believe.
And it's, again, we saw it in Paul's letters and in everything, and even with what Jesus said, the faith that we have cannot just be a faith that is spoken. It's a faith that is from the inside out, and that it's lived out each and every day. And I think I shared with you before we went on the air how there was this one thing that jumped out at me, was just that even the effects of sin, that if we're not growing in faith, if we're trying to use that as a license to sin, it's not something that just affects us. Sin has an effect on others around us, and it will drag them down with us. But Peter's very clear, be holy, be holy. And he does, and he says it because you are chosen, which is a topic that I preached on here recently that should motivate us to want to live. Not that we have to please God, but we want to, we get to, because of the relationship and the love that God has for us. But, going back to that idea of judgment, you had mentioned something that Jude said at the end that you thought was really powerful as well.
Right towards the end of Jude's book, he says, rescue others by snatching them from the flames of judgment. And we don't like to talk about hell. It's an unpalatable
there you go.
Subject
a good word.
Here in America. But Peter and Jude talk about it a lot, using it as a motivation. And I think to myself sometimes, how much more might we be willing to share our faith if rather than just, well, they can live this way or that way, no big deal. We thought, no, if they continue to live the way that they're living without Jesus, they're going to be facing flames of judgment one day.
Yeah. Our theology of judgment and hell certainly translates into how much we evangelize. In fact, you and I just read an article recently that talked about how many millennials today don't see evangelism as a priority because of their view of judgment and hell. And, you know, it's interesting to see this because Jude and Peter are addressing false teachers, and they're trying to say, hey, don't go that way, stay here, stay true to the faith. And that's just important because I think there's as much of that today that wants to pull us off and say, oh, this, you know, fall away from Jesus, this isn't important. And we need to come back and say, no, it doesn't make us horrible people to say, no, there is a judgment coming. And we don't even have to go out and just preach that and standing on street corners. I'm not a fan of that. But I think we can allow that to internally motivate us to say, well, I'm going to do everything I can to tell as many as I can about Jesus.
Yeah, it should drive everything. Absolutely. I want the opportunity to rescue others.
Absolutely. Jude says it very well. So, excellent. So tomorrow we're going to pick up with another gospel. We're going to start reading in Matthew, which I think will be great. There's a great introduction there. And so we're going to be back on Friday to kind of talk about Matthew, at least the first 10 chapters of Matthew. Hope you're staying with us. Hope you're reading, and I hope that these are encouraging to you. This has been another exciting episode of Brent and Ryan in the Morning. We'll see you guys later.